Welcome to the High Quality Fun podcast where tough times make good stories. In today's episode, we embark on an exhilarating journey into the Alaskan wilderness with Andy, a seasoned adventurer with a passion for extreme endurance sports. Andy tells us about the time he competed in the Iditarod Trail Invitational. In this event, participants can choose to hike, bike, or ski either 350 or 1,000 miles of distance. Andy, with his fat tire bike, got caught in negative 40-degree weather and had to navigate through a treacherous snowstorm. Andy's resilience and determination shine through as he shares first-hand accounts of triumphs and tribulations along the trail in this multi-day journey. Andy's stories illuminate the beauty of Alaskan wildlife, landscape, and the breathtaking beauty of the Northern Lights, all while pushing one's limits and finding comfort in discomfort. The ITI is truly a test of physical endurance and mental fortitude that you won't want to miss. So stay tuned and enjoy this episode of the High Quality Fun podcast.
Lifetime Alaskan, born and raised up here. Grew up in Palmer. Then attended University of Alaska Fairbanks. Have a mechanical engineering degree. Doing vertical construction or buildings for 20 years in the past, doing that. And all the period of time during that, I was probably racing mountain bikes or cyclocross and really got into cycling. Did a couple cross-country bicycle tours. And now I'm living in Knik with my wife and her twin sister. Our three of us have a dog kennel out here where we raise and train dogs primarily for long distance sled dog races, with our main focus being the Iditarod sled dog race. So that happens every year in March. This is pretty happening time. Dog race starts on Saturday, so we're all spooled up. Vet checks have been done, and EKGs and food drops and all that going into the sled dogs. But that's our main focus where we live out here. In the meantime, I still do a lot of snow biking and help maintain the trails out here. When the windstorms come or the snow falls, blocks the trails, do a lot of trail maintenance to keep them open for training, whether it's with the dog teams or being able to go out with a snow bike or skis or whatever else we use out on the trail.
Awesome. I should have said that in introduction, but we actually had his wife and her sister on one of the previous episodes, and that's actually how we got connected. In that episode, we talked about how many times they've done the Iditarod with the dog sleds, and that was super fun because I don't know much about dog sledding, and I learned a lot. Now we're going to take another aspect and talk about some of these other events that happen. I think for the start of this, it would be really fun to dive into this actual trail. There's all these events that happen on the historic Iditarod Trail. I believe I said that right. Yep. There's the ITI. There's something called the Iron Dog, which is a snowmobiling race. And there's people that cross-country ski it. Apparently people run it, which is bizarre. That's wild to me. And what was the last one? Oh, obviously the Iditarod. So what was this trail used for, and is it now just for these events today?
Well, historically, probably around 1900. Well, actually in 1898 is big gold discoveries in Alaska. And then in 1901, I believe it was, gold is discovered in Nome and all the places in between Knik, where I am, which is right across the water, the inlet, Knik Arm from Anchorage. This Knik is a historical old ghost town, essentially. And it was here about 15 years before Anchorage even got started. And it was a major place where boats would drop off supplies to go to some of the hard rock mining that was north of here in the Hatcher Pass Mountains or the Talkeetna Mountains. And then it also established a winter supply trail that went into the interior part of Alaska through the old town of Iditarod and other places, which was about a halfway point on the historical Iditarod Trail. It's not just one trail, it's really a network of trails that kind of went to all the different areas and then eventually made its way all the way to Nome. And then the historical Iditarod Trail network really established the main route and has maintained that that trail for all these uses. And it really gets used in February and March, becomes really popular. It starts out with the Iron Dog, and the Iron Dog is about February 20th, the second to the last weekend of February every year. And it starts and goes all the way up to Kotzebue, heads back down to Nome where they have a long break, and then it's a return route. So they do it's about 2,200, 2,400 miles, depends on how the route goes each year, and they get that done in a week. And so and they do in pairs of 2 for the Iron Dog class. So they have snow machine requirements and checkpoints along the ways, but it's a pretty intense event. Then the next weekend is the ITI. That's what we're going to be focusing on, which is the Iditarod Trail Invitational. It's a human-powered version of utilizing the trail. There's two distances: 350, which gets you to McGrath, or the full 1,000, which follows the trail all the way to Nome. And you can choose your discipline, whether it's ski, bike, or run. The most popular is probably either biking or the running, followed by the skiing. Skiing's probably a little more difficult for doing that endurance. So men and women are all on the trail at the same time. And then the following weekend, which is where we're at coming up, is when the sled dog race starts, the Iditarod sled dog race. And that has a ceremonial start in Anchorage, which goes right down the middle of downtown. They bring snow in for the streets. They traverse around the city on the pedestrian paths through the woods, and then out to one of the big parks, Campbell Airstrip Park, and where they then load the dogs back up in the trucks. And then the official starts on Sunday in Willow. And 16 dogs is the starting number this year, and the top finishers will probably finish in about 8 days for that. But in the meantime,
does the trail get you?
I was going to say,
What
the
was
people
that?
are doing the ITI out there right now, the human-powered version. The people are doing the 1,000. The Iditarod sled dog race will actually catch the tail end of those people before they hit Nome. And it's kind of a good sense of high fives on the trail as the 2 different disciplines pass each other in the wilderness.
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's cool. Does the trail get used in the summer? I assume it's just for like 4-wheeling and stuff like that.
There's sections of it that get used in the summer, like between the villages, but most of the trail is only utilized in the winter due to it traverses swamps and lakes and rivers. So that really cuts out which section of these trails are open. Most of it goes through a lot of wetlands.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess just a little tangent before we actually get into the event. My family and I went out to Alaska for a wedding last summer, and we took the Alaskan Railroad to kind of get up to Denali. And just like one of the fun facts that they were saying on the train, the announcer comes in and tells us a little bit about everything. There's like houses that you can only get to via the train. There's no other way in or out of that unless you hike in, or I don't know, you can't drive a car there.
A whistle stop, I think.
Is there? Yeah.
A whistle stop on the train. Yeah, there's some remote areas of Alaska for sure.
That's what I was going to ask. Is there any like distant towns on the outskirts of this trail? Because you said that it was originally used for gold travel and for supplies. So I would have to imagine.
Gold mining, trapping. It was a historical frontier back then before it was a state. So Alaska became a state in 1959, and I don't know what it's like 1868. I think we got purchased from Russia somewhere about that time frame, and then the big gold discovery in 1898.
Okay, if there's like supply routes out there, does that mean that there are or was towns all along this trail that are no longer inhabited?
Yes. The old town of Ophir is a gold mine town that no longer exists. I think there's still some active gold mining claims there, and there's a guy named Kyle who his family owns a cabin in Ophir that has been utilized as a Iditarod checkpoint for many years. And
Okay.
Iditarod was a place. There's several villages out there that maybe had some usage of the trail way back when, but they're still very small. The last place to access the trail by road is Willow, where the official Iditarod sled dog race starts. There's another road access point for the Iditarod Trail Invitational because it starts at Knik. The last road access is only about 10 miles from here, and then it's off the road system. And you'll cross some villages that have roads outside their town for about a mile, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's all trail.
Very cool. Yeah, that just kind of popped in my head when you were talking about the history of the trail. All right, awesome. Now that we've gone through that, I want to get into this event. So the ITI, man-powered, fat tire, cross-country ski, or what I miss, ultra marathon. So what goes in? You were mentioning in the intro of this call that you have to qualify for the 350 and you have to qualify for the 1,000-miler. I guess what goes into that? And then maybe just, give us any additional background that we need to know about these races.
Well, the qualifiers from the race organization really want first in priority. They don't want people to get stuck out there and need rescue. That's priority number one. So demonstration of winter survival skills or being able to deal with the Arctic conditions that every year they get subjected to, whether it's super cold temperatures, deep snow, blowing snow, long periods of darkness, and just having, being prepared. That's their number one criteria. Number two is they want you to demonstrate that you've done long distance events, whether it's other 100-mile qualifiers or longer, running, skiing, biking, demonstration of your fitness. That's to get into the 350. And then in order to bridge up to the next distance, which is their 1,000-mile, which goes all the way to Nome, you have to complete their 350 event either once or twice. I'm not sure the specifics exactly, but you have to complete their event before they'll let you go on to and it's an invitational too. So they take all these people who sign up and they get to weed out who they think is not necessarily the first people to sign up. And sign-ups, if you want to do it, are in April. So they come quick.
And what type of gear do you have to bring with you on this? When I was looking at photos, the bikers had the satchels over their bags. The cross-country skiers were actually towing sleds with bags and everything. I didn't see many runners, so I have no idea what they're carrying along this. But I would assume that there's either required gear or you'd be an idiot not to take gear while you're doing this thing for safety and longevity.
So the only required gear is that you have the tracker that they issue you. That's the only required gear. They figure if you've done the winter travel and this stuff, you should know better and know the appropriate gear that you should take. Some people take a wide variety of stuff, whether it's 40 below bag. Some people can get away with a 20 below bag or sleeping bag. Different size sleeping pads or other arrangements. Some people leave the camp stove behind. Some people need that for boiling water out there on the trail. How much food you take, it's all up to you. There's no requirements that say that you have to bring X amount of gear.
Wow. And then what's the average time it takes to do this for each division, I guess?
I would say let's talk about the 350. The 350, the bikers, the winning cyclists typically finish in about 3 days. The record is by John Lackey in 2014, and he did it in 1 day, 18 hours for 350 miles. Very fast. There's been a couple other people gotten close to the 2 day mark or just under. But it has to be a pretty phenomenal year. And 2014 was a great year for biking, terrible year for dog teams because it was mostly ice and dirt. There's very little snow years. So average, I would say most people, the front third is probably finishing in about 5 days, maybe 6 days. For bikers, all the bikers will finish usually in a week. Runners will probably, front runners, people who are running, I think their top times usually 5 or 6 days, but typically they're about 7 to 8. And same with the skiers. The skiers go about maybe a half a day or a day faster than the runners.
I would have never thought that those
And I think
three
yeah, and I think you're limited to 2 weeks to get to McGrath for the 350.
Okay. I would have
And
never thought that biking, running, and skiing would have similar times, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
bikers are definitely faster. There's many times out on the trail where the snow conditions are so deep and the trail's not there that you are actually pushing, and you're pushing through a foot of snow, making a bike track and 2 footprints. And if you're a good pusher, you can go about 2 miles an hour, maybe 1.5 miles.
Oh my
And
gosh.
So they're doing that while the skiers, some skiers just carry a backpack with their gear, but they sometimes need a little more, so they're dragging a sled. All of the runners typically are dragging a sled. Some go very small. Others have a larger sled that they can have a fold-out sleeping bag, and they just can open up and create their bivvy anywhere they want. The bikers typically make it to checkpoints to rest, or a public use cabin that's out there. The walkers or the runners can't always make it between the checkpoints before they need to take a break, especially in the second half of the race. So they end up bivvying out on the trail for a couple hours to get rest.
Okay, so when you say divvy, you're kind of taking a cat nap before you get going again.
Some people take 2 hours. Some people take 10. Some people need to cook a dinner, lay out their stuff, crawl in a sleeping bag, wake up, boil their water, get coffee to get going. They're in it to complete it. It's a long, arduous camping tour versus in it to win it stage. So
Right. Okay. I mean, I think that's a great introduction for me who doesn't know much about this event. My understanding is you've done this 3 times. You've done it twice for the hell of it, free of charge. And then you've done it once actually signing up for the ITI and doing it alongside it with everyone else. I guess we can go right into the actual event, because it sounded like that was a hell of a year and there might be a lot of good stories to pull from that. So why don't you just, I don't know, go through the year that you competed and we can kind of pull it apart if anything comes up.
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, the first year I did it all myself was 2014. Self-supported tour. I went 3/4 of the way to Nome. 2015, I said I had unfinished business, so I went and was going to do the whole Iditarod, but that was a low snow year, and it got restarted in Fairbanks. So I started in Fairbanks, which very few people have ridden their bike out of Fairbanks to Nomes. But yeah, I was successful that year and made to Nome. And then last year, I ended up signing up for the actual event, and I signed up for the 350. The race started out on a glorious bluebird clear day. Because I live in Knik where the race starts, a lot of our racers were asking me ahead of time, like, what's the best route to get to the first checkpoint? That's one of the other rules of the event. You only have to get to the checkpoints. How you get there, like what trail you take between, is up to you. So there's a lot of route finding. Typically the first day, there's a lot of dog mushing and snow mushing trails between here and the checkpoint. And every year, somebody who gets lost. There's people come from all over the world to do this, and the event is very well organized so that people can actually do this trail and do the personal challenge. So first day it was great. That evening it was clear skies, and we had the most amazing northern lights that many have ever seen on going up the Yentna River to the second and to second checkpoint, which was Benelit Lodge. On the river, it got really cold that night, 30, 40 below for much of it. There was a lot of people who ended up scratching that first night. A lot of people came in, especially like walkers and skiers, with cold weather injuries, frostbitten fingers, hands, toes, faces. Several people were evacuated at that point. It's a lot easier to get out of those earlier checkpoints before you start getting into further remote parts of Anchorage. So wise of a lot of those people to take that opportunity. I personally frostbit my toes a little bit, the tips of both my big toes during that night. I didn't think
What did they do?
I didn't
What do they
realize
do when they actually evacuate you?
What do they do? If it's not too bad or you just want out, they'll take you out with a snow machine. That's how most people
Okay.
get out. There was a couple, I think, that were brought out with a small plane that landed on the river and taken to a town and then to one of the local hospitals.
Okay.
So
all right, continue
nobody
on.
died. It wasn't that bad, but yeah, there were some people who had some probably some long-term injuries on their fingers or skin. So
It's just so different thinking about this when you are in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you have events all around the world, and you're always next to a road or something where you can just get, call an ambulance or something and get out of there. But they have to actually bring a plane in, and I know that a lot of people in Alaska actually own their own planes because they, fly around and see the state that way.
call it the Alaska sports car. It's, our roads are not that great. So the limited time of the season you can drive a sports car on our highways is short, but you can use an airplane almost all season long, and they're about the same price to own and operate. So there you go.
Yeah, when I went up there, just for the listeners, this is something that was really cool for me. We were driving through what I'd consider a subdivision, more or less, and you have all these giant barns attached to these houses, and the barns were, I don't know, as big as the house, and they were all personal hangars. Everyone had their plane in there, and the people we were staying with there, they said that, yeah, some days you'll be driving home or away from work and you'll just see a plane jutting down the main road to go to the nearest takeoff point, and yeah, they'll just go fly around the state that way. That's just so bizarre. You don't see that anywhere else in the United States, as far as I'm aware of.
No.
Yeah, so
aviation is very important to the state of Alaska. Whether it's hunting, fishing, recreation, tourism, access. A lot of the villages in Alaska are only accessible by air, or sometimes boat in the summer. But yeah, air travel is very important in the state.
That's cool. Maybe towards the end of the episode we can get into that a little bit more, because now I'm curious. But back to the story, you said you got a little bit of frostbite on your journey in day one. What happened from there?
It didn't affect me per se. My frostbite was minor. I just frost nipped the fingerprint part of the end of your toe on each one just a little bit, and it wasn't until a day later or 2 checkpoints later where the blisters started getting a little puffier, and that was in Roan. Ended up having them drained by one of the doctors who was volunteering out there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're good to go," and he's like, just keep it dry. Well, it's hard to do when you're out on the trail like that. Anyways, it didn't cause me a problem. 2 weeks later, I lost the skin off the end of my toes, and they're all fine now. So, but continuing on up the trail, it was cold, and then traveled most of the night up to Finger Lake Lodge, which is the 3rd checkpoint. The trail was good shape then, but there was forecast of a snowstorm coming in, so that made everybody kind of scramble at the checkpoint to get out of there. I woke up at like 3 a.m. to go use the bathroom outside, and I was like, "Oh here comes the snow. The snow wasn't supposed to start falling till like 8 a.m. And I'm like, oh, it's early, so time to gather everything back up and hit the trail. And it's a good thing I did, because by the time I got to the next checkpoint, which is Rainy Pass up in the middle of the Alaska range, there's like 6 to 10 inches of new snow, and it was still coming down. Spent some time at Rainy Pass refueling, and just eating, and I think I took a half-hour nap, but it was middle of the day. It was light, and I started up over the Alaska range, and that section of the trail, it's before the Iditarod sled dog race comes through, so there's no markers, and there's no trail. Essentially, there's some wooden tripods that are set up that remain permanent up through the mountain pass. But when the Iditarod sled dog race comes in, they put a bunch of lath out there with reflectors that are not there when we go through. There's a trail buried underneath the windblown snow that the Iron Dog snow machine race came through with, but we don't have much to follow. So a lot of pushing and following, or because of the new snow, pushed the bike a lot through the pass that year. And I've noticed following the current racers with the race going on right now, they're pushing again this year. It looks like there's a bunch of new snow. So slow going, you can follow their trackers. They're going like 1.5 miles an hour. My challenge was I got up to the pass at about 8 o'clock in the evening. It's dark. The winds picked up, like 20, 30 mile an hour crosswinds. There's no trail. You look out ahead, it's just a wide open valley in the dark. Your headlight can't cast far enough. But I know that there's from doing all the other events with the dog sled race and traveling by snow machine, and also biking it previously, there's a old hunter's cabin up there that's used by one of the guide outfits, and I was able to post hole over to that in the dark, and found my way into a little bit of shelter. It's nothing fancy. It's an old log building with no chinking, and the wind and the spin drift blows right through it. I was able to shovel out a couple drifts from the inside and find a flat spot to sleep on one of the old bunks. But it was shelter out of the storm, and I stayed there for about 10 hours. I'm sure people were wondering what my tracker's doing. So, but yeah, because nobody stops in the middle of Rainy Pass to take a break with the weather going like that. I'm sure people thought, what the heck am I doing up there hunkered down in a snowbank somewhere? But I was able to get some shelter. Not warm, but it was shelter. And then next morning, got up, post-holed my way all the way up to the pass, and got a couple of pictures with the sign at the top that talks about the elevation. And I mean, it's a welded steel plate sign that's well anchored and doesn't go anywhere. And then I was able to ride most of the trail going down the backside. There's less snow on the north side of the Alaska range, and then into Roan. It's at that checkpoint. So, but just a lot of walking. It took me forever to get between the Rainy Pass checkpoint and Roan. Much further. There's people ahead of me that did it faster, and there's people who came up behind me as a group. But when I had left the Rainy Pass checkpoint, I think I left with 3 or 4 guys, and no, it was 3 other guys. But 2 of them had turned back to the checkpoint, and one kind of bivvied shortly after leaving the checkpoint, and I just kept going. But whether smart or not, I made it, and it wasn't too bad. It's part of that original requirements. I say they're more interested in making sure that you're got your winter survival skills than they do that you can prove that you can run 50 miles.
Yeah, and I mean, if they have a tracker, so all they have is a GPS location on you, right? They have no idea if you're dead at that point, right?
Nope.
Do you have a radio too, or like an SOS button?
Some people carry an InReach or GPS device that will ping for, you let relatives or friends know where you're at, and you can even text message with them. Some people even carry a sat phone. I didn't carry any of that. I had the most minimalist GPS device that kind of showed me where somebody's old trail had been from previous years of doing the event. I didn't even have a bike computer. It showed me how many miles I had gone. I just went out for the trail. And
That's wild.
I rarely carry a bike computer. I have my cell phone, but there's no cell reception out there. I usually mostly just had it to take pictures.
Right. That's wild. And then I assume that when you're walking this bike through, you said 10 feet of snow, it's just
10
grueling.
inches.
One step. Oh, 10
That's it.
inches. Okay. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Man, that's wild.
Yeah, so that's 10 inches of new snow on top of a base. So there's probably 3-4 feet of snow, but you're only punching through, a foot or less. You're not going over your knees. How about that? But that's, top of your boot, still slow going when you're pushing you got a 30-pound bike with 40 to 50 pounds worth of gear. Depends on how much food and water you're carrying. So push 80 pounds worth of gear in the deep snow.
Okay. I assume there's enough. Is the base from people actually dog sledding it, or is it just the weight of snow on top of snow on top of snow?
Some of that, but the snow machine traffic that went through the week before the Iron Dog race has packed a base.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors.
Here on the High Quality Fun podcast, we love showcasing people's stories through our interviews and posts. This gives our guests the opportunity to share their favorite memories, but sometimes audio alone is not enough. Most people are sitting on a collection of hundreds of photos and videos capturing their favorite moments without the time or experience needed to compile these memories into a video. This is why I have chosen to partner with Spivo. Simply send them your unsorted photos and videos, and in 7 days or less, they will create a professional video edit that allows you to relive your favorite memories again and again. To ensure every customer is satisfied with their video edit, Spivo provides unlimited revisions for 30 days and offers a 100% money-back satisfaction guarantee. As someone who has limited time to edit his family adventures, let alone this podcast, I am excited to work with Spivo to help everyone eternalize their favorite moments. Visit spivo.com/discount/high-quality-fun to learn more and let us know what you think about the product. We'd love to share it.
Now, back to the show.
One thing that's like fascinating to me is you're doing all this. You are literally in the middle of nowhere in nature. I have to, and you said right off the bat, you saw just the most gorgeous northern lights you've seen, in a long time. You probably see them all the time up there in Alaska. What is the scenery like for this whole trip? I know like Alaskan has some wild mountain ranges. Are you going through the mountains this whole time? Is it flat trees, like everything?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. First day starts through the marshes, lakes, and trees, and then you're on a section of the river for about 50 miles. And you got this big, broad, winding river with trees on the edge. The mountains are kind of far off in the distance, but you can see Denali, which is the largest mountain in North America. And then between it is Hunter, and then Mount Foraker, which is like the second largest mountain, just this huge Alaska range to the north. And you see those vistas. It's just amazing. They're huge white mountains on the horizon. The Northern Lights I was talking about earlier, I saw the greens, the purples, the reds, and the giant curtains that you typically see in calendars and posters. I mean, they were out from horizon to horizon all across the sky and, moving. And it wasn't just like one little blip for 5 minutes. No, it just went for hours and hours. You talk about, mentioned that we see Northern Lights frequently. We do, but a lot of times it's kind of green, cloudy, wispy kind of thing, and not real impressive. You can tell they're Northern Lights, but to get the big curtains of the multicolors is all across the sky. It's kind of rare to have them that vibrant, but when it happens, it's spectacular. And we just happen to have one of those nights. And when you're out that far into the wilderness too, there's no road traffic, there's no other noise. Typically in the middle of the night, there's no snow machine traffic. There's no small airplane traffic. They're not flying. You might hear a jet over the top of you, a commercial airliner, but that's about it. Otherwise, it is very quiet when the wind's not blowing. Just very surreal. It's just the crunch of the snow underneath your tires, and you're breathing, and your thoughts going through your head. But then the trail kind of gets into the Alaska range, and then you start getting in between the mountains, and the mountains are rising up on each side of you. Tree lines at 1,500 feet, and so you get above that, starts getting to like dwarf willows and scrub brush, and then Rainy Passes about 3,200 feet. It doesn't sound very high, but we started at sea level where the race starts, and much of Alaska's villages and city centers are all less than 1,000 feet in elevation. 3,000 feet, there's not many towns in Alaska at 3,000 feet. But that's where we pass through the Alaska range, through the mountains, and you go down the other side through Denzel Gorge, and there's rock cliffs and waterfalls frozen waterfalls over the side, and it's a very narrow canyon as you make your way down to Roan.
That sounds gorgeous. Did you come across any wildlife while you were out there?
Yeah, saw some bison between Roan and Nikolai in the Farewell Burn, as it's called. 30, 40 years ago, there was a large forest fire that went through this area, and this area never really recovered from the forest fire, and there's still a lot of old, dead, scorched trees. It's an area that has very little rainfall on the north side of the Alaska Range. It's kind of in a rain shadow area. But there's a bison herd out there, and saw some bison. There were some other riders who almost got caught in a stampede as they went down the trail. They got I don't know how the guy did or had the nerve to do it, but he's riding along and he's got his cell phone camera out and he's filming these bison running across the trail in front of him in the snow, and he's still riding. And he's like in the dark with a headlamp and the light on his bike. I guess that's what you get to do when you get tired. You're like, this is fun, the game, but I saw him off in the, I don't know, probably 20 yards away off in the trail. They weren't any issue to me. I think I saw a couple moose the first day. Lots of birds, eagles, ravens, chickadees. Nothing spectacular in that aspect. No predators, no wolves or lynx or anything like that. But moose and bison.
Moose and eagles.
Yeah.
Everywhere in Alaska. Cool. That sounds absolutely gorgeous. I'm hoping that you can share some photos of this thing, of this race after this podcast so that I can check them out and share them with the listeners. But
Sure.
Unless there's anything else that you want to mention about this race, it sounds totally grueling, totally beautiful, and hats off to you for completing it.
The biggest thing about doing these winter races, and they're off the trail system on non-groomed, non-marked locations. I mean, it can be great. You can have a fantastic hard snow machine trail, and you can be going along at 10, 12 miles an hour and make fantastic time. Other times, the weather blows in, you're dealing with wind, deep snow, and you're down to walking. For an example, when I left Roan to Nikolai, it's about 70 miles. I had rested I want to say about 10 hours in Roan. My plan was to do that all in one push. I wanted to leave Roan wholly refreshed, plenty of calories in the system, and I left to go to Nikolai. But when I got within 20 miles of Nikolai, the trail disappeared. There was that snowstorm that had dumped a bunch of snow, and the trail was gone. There's no markers. There's not any tripods out that area. Like I said, I had my GPS, which had a tracker, breadcrumbs from a previous rider who had done it. So I pulled that out, and I can see I'm on the trail, but you're looking across the horizon in short, scrubby black spruce on a swamp, and there's wide, vast areas of white, and you kind of look off in the horizon, and it's like, well, the trail's in that direction. Choose a vector, and there's no markers, and you just start going, and it's like, I'm gonna head for that tree half mile off across the swamp. And nobody else would go out for a walk in training to pushing a bike through a foot of snow and choose to make their own trail. You always wait for snow machine to go by or have a trail set up. But in this race event, you do that. You just choose your trail, choose your vector, and go. And you hope you stay on trail and make it to the next spot. I did that for about 15 miles, and I got so exhausted. I was 5 miles from Nikolai. I'm like, man, I was going to do this all in one push. Didn't happen. I mean, I got so fatigued. I couldn't go any further. Another guy caught me. His name's Fred. Like Fred. And he's like, yeah, he's like exhausted, dude. We were trading leads at that time, breaking trail, and just couldn't do it. We just like decided to bivvy, stomped out a flat spot in the snow in a couple spruce trees to protect us from the little bit of wind that was out there, laid down the sleeping bag. I hardly even made any attempt to like create a bivvy or like any kind of shelter. I just threw my sleeping bag down on a tarp on the snow, got out some trash bags, put them over top of my boots, didn't take off any clothes, just put everything in the sleeping bag, zipped up. I'm like, well, I'm gonna sleep here as long as the cold will let me. It's time for your alarm. The cold eventually seep in on you. I lasted about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, and then the cold kind of got to me. I'm like, okay, time to go, because I never wanted to be there long. I wanted to make it to Nikolai, but I had to take that edge off. Fred is like, I called. It was like, man, I'm cold. I'm going. He's like, okay, what? He had put down his mat, his insulating pad, and got real cozy and took off his boots and stuff. And he ended up staying like 4 or 5 hours. And he had a good little nap. But I knew I didn't want to stay that long. I knew I wanted to get out of there. And then shortly after I got up, there's 3 more people that had caught up to us. And they're definitely commended us that the trail that we broke, that they were able to push through. And I followed them the last 5 miles. It was much easier to get into the checkpoint.
You owe me, guys. You owe me.
Yeah. And about a mile or 2 miles from the village, we got onto a snow machine track, because there's no reason for people from the village to go out where we were out on the trail. There's nothing really out there. So they have a small perimeter around their village where they use their snow machines, and we got on their trail. Yep. And then got a couple of hamburgers there in the village and had a place to sleep inside for that night. And we were watching the weather pattern again in Nikolai because the temperature had dropped. And that night it was 40, 50 below. And we're waiting the next morning to try to get the temperature up around at least at 30, but that never happened. I think we got a high of about 35, and we decided to leave. And there's a group of like 5 or 6 of us that left for the next checkpoint of McGrath, which is the finish 50 miles away. And it took all day to do that miles too, in the soft snow and the super cold conditions. So, you're covered in frost, and eyebrows are covered, and you got special face masks to cover your face and goggles, just trying to keep the heat or cold away from your face.
My God. Do you know of a
and everything's frozen. Good luck keeping your water bottles melted. So we always carry our water on our backs underneath your clothes with your with a camelback and a straw. There's lots of techniques at keeping your water from freezing, and hiding the straw inside your layers under your armpit. Even if you put it over your shoulder like they normally run, it'll freeze over your shoulder, because that's where your insulation gets packed down, and you'll freeze your water straw. So kind of run it up underneath your armpit and hold it next to your chest on the inside of your layers, and dig it out when you need it.
My gosh.
Just trying to get enough calories of food is a challenge too.
Yeah. I just don't know a lot of events like this that have such a hard winter survival element to it. I mean, you sound like you're so natural with it all, but me thinking about hiking through the woods and negative 40-degree weather and then having to sleep next to a tree sounds like, I don't know. I've done winter camping before, and it was cool, but it was like a clear sky day. It was, I don't know, 10 degrees. much easier than what you just explained.
That's the key. This is not my first event or my first experience doing this. My first winter camp out was probably with Boy Scouts when I was 12 or 13, and we had a very adventuresome scoutmaster who would just take us out to the hardest core stuff. And this guy was known for not bringing a tent or stove, cooked everything over an open fire, but definitely did some winter camping trips with them. And that's how I got started. It's like starting with 10 degrees or 0 and getting comfortable with that. And then when I got in the 20s and 30s, I had my other friends who were more interested in doing light mountaineering. I want to say we weren't doing big mountains or anything, but just in the winter doing some small mountains around here. And it's going out and playing outside. Just practice. You never get perfect at it, but you do learn tricks that make it more comfortable to survive the suffering.
Survive the suffering.
You get comfortable being uncomfortable. How about that?
I like that. I like that a lot. That's like that's honestly, it's kind of what I want to talk about with this podcast is, tough times make good stories is kind of the motto that I'm trying to go with. So yeah, maybe we can spend the last 10, 15 minutes talking about that. You've done a lot of these things, a lot of these trips on your own. Is there any particular stories that come to mind that you think it'd be worth sharing, either on the snow machine, the bikes, or the dog sled races? Not even races, just like personal trips you've done.
Everything's it seems to be about hardships. I explained sometimes when the trail's great, you're moving along 12 miles, 15 miles an hour, and it's wonderful. Those are the days you dream of, but you always are running into challenges. I'll pull back to like 2015 when I rode out of Fairbanks. I got to the checkpoint of Ruby, which is on the Yukon River. That checkpoint village, it's a small village, and sits up on a hill above the river on a cliff. And up top is 30, 35 below. Nice day. When I left that in the morning and dropped down to the river, went out about a mile or two. So these fat tire bikes, you're riding tires that are 5 inches wide, and they're big balloons, so they got a lot of air volume. And laws of thermodynamics, air condenses when it gets cold. Well, down on the river, my tires went flat. The temperature dropped down to like 60 below down there. Down the river, probably 300 feet invert, and out on the river, there's a cold sink. And here I am you have to have your tires already kind of soft for the snow, and I get out there, and now my tires are flat. What do you do? So I pull out my pump, and I stuck it inside my coat, next to one of my base layers, and it was like wickedly cold chunk of aluminum metal pipe, it was like awful. It was just kind of like burning you. And so I start pushing, try to generate some heat because all the tires are flat. Now, worst thing I want to do, I didn't want to break the bead or the tire off of the rim or break that sealant. And so I got the pump all working. I checked it a couple times, made sure that the rubber O-rings is what I was really cautious about. I didn't want them to crack or break on that pump, because if you're out, if you don't have a pump, you're screwed. And I could have walked back to the village 3 miles back, but my goal is to make it to the next place. So anyways, it was working. I opened the valve on the tire and pushed the little bleed valve on the press the valve and a little sealant. So not running tubes, running a glycol based tire sealant inside to hold air. And a little bit of that came out, and I had lightweight gloves on, and that sealant touching the finger. I actually had a burn spot, like a cryogenic freeze spot, through my glove on my finger where that fluid had come out. And I was able to get one tire pumped up. I was like, oh, that's great. Put the pump back in my coat, pushed a little further, probably another 10, 15 minutes, pulled it out, checked the back tire, filled that up, and was able to roll on to Galena. But that was a cold day. I put everything on that I had to make that. And when it's that cold, you're definitely thinking, okay, I'm going to move this zipper and I'm going to open that pocket. You're kind of pre-strategizing all your moves as you take out your lighter weight gloves that are inside your bigger gloves that are inside of your pogie over mitts that are inside with hand warmers. And so you're strategizing how to limit your exposure to cold. So so it don't hurt.
Wow. Would you say that the fat tire is kind of your favorite thing to do when you're traveling around these trails?
Yeah. And another thing I really like doing, I like combining the dog mushing sport and the snow biking. My wife, Christy Barrington, and her sister Anna, they're preparing for Iditarod and other middle distance sled dog races. So we have a good pool of sled dogs that are well trained up for dog mushing. Well, my favorite is to put 2 on a bungee leash and a special bike journeying system on the front of my snow bike and hit the trails. So they get the opportunity to run and some focused leader training in addition to the dogs really help pull you through when the snow's a little softer. And it's just
that's
fun.
really cool.
Fun to have people out there or dogs out there when you're riding the trails.
That's cool. That's very unique. I know in the last episode we talked about how the dogs pull the 4-wheeler in the summer, and I didn't even think that they could pull a bike. I figured they'd pull you over or something.
Yeah, I like to do it in the winter, and in the winter temperatures are colder and the snow's there if they need to take a bite of snow and they don't overheat in the winter. It's to run them too far in the summer with a bike, they probably overheat because typically when we're running with the 4-wheeler, it's in the fall and there's lots of mud puddles and streams and other stuff that we cross that keeps them well hydrated. But who likes to ride their bike through mud puddles after mud puddle? You get soaked. So it's a lot of fun in the winter.
That's funny that you're complaining about getting wet when you're talking about biking in negative 60-degree weather. Well, this was great, Andy. I think you're a little bit crazy doing all this, but I think that's wild and so cool that you're able to, put your body through these challenges and get through them. I want to get somebody on who's done the Iron Dog at some point, and I want to hear about more events like this where people get out and do these wild things that I've never even heard of. Before we sign off, is there any shout outs or things you want to shill?
Let's see. So just more information. I'm leaving on the day after the sled dog race with snow machines. Me and our handler, we're going to ride to Nome and follow behind the race and help out if needed. We go out and clean up some checkpoints or our trail angels if the Iditarod Trail Committee requests that. They have in the past. But we're just going out by a snow machine tour. Other shout outs, I'd say go to trackleaders.com and you can follow the ITI, the Iditarod Trail Invitational, in progress right now. The leaders are pushing a great pace out there. I have quite a few friends that are running the race, biking, running, skiing. Some are going all the way to Gnomes. Many are, I think they allow 70 to McGrath and 30 onto Nome. But check out Track Leaders. You'll be able to follow that event. And then Iditarod Sled Dog Race will have their own tracking system if you want to follow that event also.
And that's next weekend, right?
That starts Saturday is the official or ceremonial in Anchorage, and Sunday is the official start when the clock starts ticking. But the action right now is the ITI. They're on the trail right now, and they have up to 30 days to get to Nome, so it'll be up for a while.
That's awesome. All right, man. Thank you so much.
I'd say last shout out is Scene Double Sled Dog Racing. That's our kennel, and you can follow Anna on her journey during the sled dog race this year.
Is only Anna's running it? Christy's not running it?
Yeah. Christy took a year off this year. She's run 14 years in a row, decided to try something a little different, and this will be Anna's 13th year. So they're very accomplished and recognized mushers in Alaska and around the world.
It's very cool. Well, Andy, thank you so much. I hope you had a good time. I really enjoyed hearing about this.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the High Quality Fun podcast. If you guys enjoyed this show, please give us a follow. And if you have a good story or just want to say hi, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks for listening.